Elena wiped down the massage table for the third time that evening. The small clinic where she worked sat tucked between a flower shop and a bakery on Maple Street. The scent of fresh bread often drifted through her treatment room, mixing with lavender oil and eucalyptus. She had been working as a massage therapist for 5 years now, building a modest but steady clientele. Most of her clients were elderly women with aching backs or young athletes nursing sports injuries. The phone rang just as she was about to lock up for the night. Elena hesitated. It was already past 8 and her feet hurt from standing all day. But bills had been piling up lately and she needed every appointment she could get. Serenity Wellness. "This is Elena speaking," she answered, tucking the phone between her shoulder and ear. "I need an appointment. Tonight. Now." The voice on the other end was deep, commanding with an accent she couldn't quite place. Italian, maybe. Or Greek. Elena glanced at the clock. "Sir, we're actually closing. I can book you for tomorrow morning at 9 or I'll pay double. Triple if you prefer. I need someone skilled. My secretary says you're the best in the city." Something in his tone made her pause. It wasn't just arrogance. There was pain underneath it, carefully hidden but unmistakable to someone who spent her days reading bodies and tension. Elena thought about her rent, due in 3 days. She thought about her mother's medication that insurance only partially covered. "I can give you an hour," she said finally, "but you'll need to arrive within 30 minutes. I'm already outside." Elena's heart skipped. She walked to the window and pulled back the curtain slightly. A black Mercedes sat parked directly in front of her clinic, its engine still running. Even in the dim streetlight, she could see it was expensive, the kind of car that cost more than she made in 2 years. She unlocked the front door 20 minutes later, after hastily setting up the room again. The man who entered made the small waiting area feel even smaller. He was tall, perhaps 6'3", with broad shoulders that filled out his perfectly tailored charcoal suit. His dark hair was swept back, touched with gray at the temples. A strong jawline, a nose that looked like it had been broken at least once, and eyes so dark they appeared black in the soft lighting. But what struck Elena most was the way he moved. Despite his size, he walked with a controlled grace like a predator who knew exactly how dangerous he was. 2 other men followed him inside, both built like refrigerators, both wearing the same expensive suits and the same watchful expressions. "I'm Marco," he said simply, extending a hand. His grip was firm but not crushing, and his palm was surprisingly rough for someone who wore suits that probably cost thousands. "Elena, please, follow me." She led him to the treatment room, very aware of the 2 guards who remained in the waiting area. "Your friends can wait out here. Client privacy, you understand?" Marco's lips quirked in what might have been a smile. "They stay close, always." "They can stay in the hallway outside the room," Elena compromised, her voice steadier than she felt. "But not inside. I don't work with an audience." For a moment his dark eyes studied her and she wondered if she'd just made a terrible mistake. Then he nodded once, sharp and decisive. The guards took positions outside the door without a word. "What kind of pain are you experiencing?" Elena asked, falling into her professional mode. It helped calm her nerves: shoulder, upper back, neck. He began removing his suit jacket, revealing a crisp white shirt underneath. "I was in an accident a few days ago." As he unbuttoned his shirt, Elena noticed his hands. The knuckles were bruised, healing but recent. When he turned to hang his shirt on the hook, she saw the full extent of the damage. His entire right side was a canvas of purple and yellow bruises, some fresh, some fading. A long, healing cut ran along his left shoulder blade. This was no car accident. These were impact injuries, the kind you got from fighting or being hit repeatedly. Elena had seen similar marks on boxers and martial artists. She should have been afraid. Every instinct screamed at her to make an excuse and leave. But she'd never turned away a client in pain before, and something kept her feet planted. "Lie face down on the table," she instructed quietly. "I'll start with your upper back." Marco complied, settling onto the table with a barely suppressed grunt of pain. Elena washed her hands and warmed the massage oil between her palms. "Lavender and peppermint tonight. Good for inflammation and tension." She began carefully, assessing the damage with gentle touches. His muscles were incredibly tight, locked up from days of pain and probably stress. As her fingers found the worst knots, Marco made a sound low in his throat. "Too much pressure?" she asked. "No." His voice was muffled by the face cradle. "It's good, continue." Elena worked methodically, using long strokes to warm the muscles before addressing the deeper tension. Despite the bruises, his physique was impressive, clearly maintained through regular training. But the stress he carried was extraordinary. Every muscle fiber felt wound tight like wire. As she worked on a particularly stubborn knot near his shoulder blade, Marco suddenly spoke. "You're not afraid, it wasn't a question." Elena continued working, keeping her touch professional and steady. "Should I be? Most people are. When they look at me, I see a man in pain. That's all that matters in this room." Another silence, longer this time. Elena moved to his neck where the tension was worst. She could feel his pulse under her fingers, steady and strong despite the pain he must be feeling. "Do it again," he said quietly. "The shoulder, slower." Elena returned to the shoulder area, adjusting her technique. She used her thumbs to trace along the muscle fibers, working deeper but more gradually, giving his body time to release the tension rather than fighting against it. Marco's breathing changed, becoming deeper, more relaxed. "Where did you learn this? School? Practice? 5 years of working with bodies that hurt?" She moved to his other shoulder. "And my grandmother. She used to say that healing touch isn't just about pressure and technique. It's about listening to what the body is trying to say." Wise woman? She was. The hour passed in near silence after that, broken only by Elena's quiet instructions for him to turn or adjust position. By the time she finished, Marco's muscles had released significantly. Though full healing would take several sessions and rest he probably wouldn't allow himself. He sat up slowly, rolling his shoulders experimentally. Something like surprise crossed his features. "You're talented." Elena handed him his shirt. "You need ice on those ribs, rest, and probably another session in 2 days. If those bruises get worse or you develop a fever, see a doctor." Marco dressed efficiently, his movements noticeably easier than when he'd arrived. He pulled out a wallet and counted out bills that made Elena's eyes widen. "It was 5 times her usual fee, that's too much. For seeing me after hours. And for your discretion." His dark eyes met hers. "You didn't ask questions." "It's not my business." Elena took the money, mostly because refusing seemed more dangerous than accepting. "But if someone hurt you this badly, maybe it should be someone's business." Something flickered in his expression. Amusement, perhaps, or respect. "Same time, 2 days. I'll call ahead this time." He left with his silent guards, and Elena locked the door behind them with shaking hands. Only then did she realize she just treated someone who was almost certainly dangerous, possibly criminal, and definitely not someone who got hurt in any normal accident. The smart thing would be to refuse the next appointment, to forget Marco's dark eyes and his careful courtesy, and the pain he'd tried so hard to hide. But Elena had never been particularly good at doing the smart thing. And something about him, something beyond the obvious danger, had caught her attention in a way she couldn't quite name. She tucked the money away and began cleaning the room, already wondering what secrets those bruises held, and what kind of man inspired such loyalty that 2 guards would stand silent watch while their boss received a massage. 2 days later, her phone would ring again, and Elena, despite every warning bell in her head, would answer. Marco arrived exactly on time for his second appointment, which somehow didn't surprise Elena. Punctuality seemed like it would matter to a man like him. The same Mercedes, the same 2 guards, but this time in daylight. Elena got a better look at them as they entered. Both were younger than Marco, probably in their 30s, with the watchful eyes of men who'd seen violence up close. "Back room," Elena told Marco, who nodded and moved past her. The guards settled into the waiting room chairs, looking uncomfortable with the lavender scent and soft music. One of them, the shorter one with a scar across his eyebrow, picked up a wellness magazine and stared at it like it might explode. In the treatment room, Marco was already removing his jacket. The bruises had faded to greenish yellow, healing faster than Elena had expected. Either he was remarkably healthy, or he was used to recovering from injuries quickly. Neither possibility was particularly comforting. "How has the pain been?" Elena asked, washing her hands. "Better. I could sleep on my right side last night. First time in a week." He paused while unbuttoning his shirt. "You were right about the ice. Most people don't listen to that advice. I'm not most people." Elena couldn't argue with that. She prepared the massage oil, choosing a different blend today, rosemary and eucalyptus, better for deep healing and circulation. As Marco settled onto the table, she noticed something she'd missed during the first session. A tattoo on his left ribcage, partially hidden by the bruising. She couldn't make out the full design, but it looked old. The ink slightly faded. She began working on his shoulders, feeling the difference immediately. The muscles were still tight, but they released more easily now, like they remembered how to relax. Elena worked in silence for several minutes before Marco spoke. "You have family? Here in the city?" The question caught her off guard. "My mother. She lives about 20 minutes away." "Why? Just curious. You seem like someone who takes care of others." Elena's hands paused briefly before continuing their work. "Is that why you're asking? To know if I have people who'd notice if something happened to me?" Marco turned his head to look at her, his dark eyes sharp. "If I wanted to hurt you, Elena, I wouldn't need to ask about your family first. I'm asking because I'm trying to understand you. Why would you need to understand your massage therapist? Because you're not afraid of me. That makes you either very brave or very foolish, and I don't think you're foolish." Elena moved to his lower back, applying firmer pressure. "Maybe I'm just good at hiding fear." "No, you're calm. I can feel it in your hands. You're calm even though you know I'm dangerous." He shifted slightly, getting more comfortable. "That cut on my shoulder. The one that's healing. You didn't ask about it. You said you were in an accident. That was a lie." "I know." Marco was quiet for a long moment. Elena continued working, giving him space to speak or stay silent as he chose. Finally, he said, "Someone tried to kill me. In my own restaurant. 3 men with knives. I dealt with 2 of them. The third got lucky." Elena's hands didn't falter. "Did he survive?" "The third man?" "No." The single word hung in the air between them. Elena should have been horrified. Should have been calling the police or running from the room. Instead, she found herself asking, was it business or personal? In my world, it's always both. Marco's voice was matter-of-fact, neither proud nor ashamed. "I run several enterprises. Import, export, protection, dispute resolution. Some people don't like how I do business. You're telling me you're a criminal. I'm telling you I'm a businessman who operates outside certain legal constraints. There's a difference." Elena moved to his neck where tension had built up again. Not from pain this time, but from stress. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you'll find out anyway. Better you hear it from me." He paused. "And because I don't want you to be surprised when you see my face in the newspaper eventually." "Should I be worried? About treating you?" "My enemies won't touch you. They know the rules. Civilians stay out of it, but..." He hesitated, which seemed unusual for him. "The police might ask questions. If they connect you to me, and what should I tell them? The truth. That I'm your client. That you provide massage therapy. Nothing more, nothing less." Elena finished the neck work and moved to his arms. His forearms were thick with muscle, the hands strong and scarred. These were hands that had done violence, but they'd been gentle when he shook her hand. Controlled. "I should refuse to treat you," she said quietly. "That would be the smart thing." "Yes, it would. But I won't. Why not?" Elena thought about that while she worked on the tension in his right shoulder. "Because everyone deserves healthcare, healing, pain relief. I took an oath when I got my license. Not the same as doctors, but similar. To help people in pain without judgment. Even criminals? Even criminals. Pain doesn't discriminate. Why should healing?" Marco made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You're an unusual woman, Elena. I'm practical. You pay well, you're not disrespectful, and you clearly need the treatment. The rest, I'm choosing not to think too hard about the rest." That might be wise. They fell into comfortable silence again. Elena worked through the rest of the session, noting how much better his range of motion had become. By the time she finished, Marco could lift his right arm over his head without wincing. He dressed slowly, testing his mobility. "Same time in 3 days? Your muscles would benefit from more frequent sessions while you're healing. Every other day if possible." Marco pulled out his phone, scrolling through what looked like an incredibly packed schedule. Wednesdays and Saturdays. Evening slots like tonight. I'll pay for the extended hours. That works. Elena made notes in her appointment book. "And Marco? If you get hurt again, badly hurt, go to a hospital. I can help with muscle pain and tension. I can't help if something's broken or infected." His lips curved in a real smile this time, transforming his face from intimidating to almost handsome. "I'll keep that in mind." After he left, Elena stood by the window watching the Mercedes pull away. She should have been afraid. Everything about Marco screamed danger, but instead she felt curious, intrigued by the contradiction of a violent man who was careful about her comfort, who asked about her family, who could have threatened her, but chose honesty instead. The rest of the week passed in a blur of regular clients. Mrs. Chen with her arthritis, young Danny with his basketball injury, Lisa from the bank with her stress headaches, normal people with normal lives and normal problems. Wednesday evening, Marco arrived with only one guard this time. The tall one with the cold eyes. Marco seemed looser, more relaxed than the previous visits. The healing was progressing well. Good week? Elena asked as he settled onto the table. Productive. We acquired a new shipping contract. Very lucrative. He said it the way someone else might talk about a successful business merger, which technically it probably was. Just not the legal kind. Elena worked on his shoulders, pleased by how much the tissue had improved. The bruising is almost gone, thanks to you, and rest and ice. I assume you actually followed the advice this time? Most of it. Rest is difficult in my line of work. So is healing if you keep getting stabbed. That earned her another almost smile. Point taken. Halfway through the session while Elena was working on his lower back, Marco said something that changed everything. My mother used to say that healing hands were a gift from God, that the people who had them were chosen. Was your mother religious? Very. She prayed for me every day, even after she knew what I'd become. His voice carried a note of something Elena couldn't quite identify. Regret maybe, or grief. She died 2 years ago.
Heart attack.
Quick, the doctor said. No pain. Elena's hands gentled automatically. I'm sorry. She would have liked you. She always said the best people were the ones who helped others no matter what. She sounds wise. She was. Too wise to have a son like me, probably. Elena moved to his right shoulder, working on a stubborn knot. Parents don't stop loving their children because of the choices they make. She prayed for you because she loved you, not despite who you were. Marco was quiet for so long that Elena thought she'd overstepped. Then so softly she almost missed it, he said, "Thank you." The rest of the session passed in thoughtful silence. When Marco left that evening, he pressed an extra $100 into her hand. For the wisdom. My mother would have approved. Elena watched him leave, and realized with a start that she was beginning to see Marco not as a dangerous criminal, but as a complicated man trying to navigate a violent world while holding on to some thread of humanity. It was a dangerous realization, the kind that led to bad decisions and worse consequences. But as she locked up for the night, Elena couldn't quite bring herself to regret it. Something was beginning between them, something that transcended the simple relationship of therapist and client. She didn't have a name for it yet, but she could feel it growing with each session, each revealed piece of his carefully guarded life. Saturday's appointment would bring another revelation, and Elena, despite her better judgment, was already looking forward to it. Saturday evening arrived with unexpected rain. Elena watched water stream down the clinic windows, thinking about cancellations. Her last regular appointment had rescheduled due to the weather. Only Marco's session remained, and somehow she knew he would show up regardless of the storm. She was right. At exactly 6:30, the black Mercedes pulled up outside. Marco emerged with an umbrella, but he was already half soaked. The rain had intensified in the few seconds it took him to walk from the car to the door. His guard stayed in the vehicle this time. Just you tonight? Elena asked, handing him a towel. Alessio has the night off. His daughter's birthday. Marco dried his face and hair, looking more human somehow without the guards and perfect grooming. I thought we could manage without the security detail for one evening. Elena locked the door behind him. Alessio, the one with the scar? You notice things. It's part of the job. Bodies tell stories if you know how to read them. She led him to the treatment room. You're tense tonight. More than usual. Marco removed his jacket, water droplets falling from the expensive fabric. We had a meeting today. Difficult negotiations with some business partners. It didn't go as smoothly as I'd hoped. Anyone need medical attention after these negotiations? He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Not yet. But the night is young. As Marco removed his shirt, Elena noticed something new. Fresh scratches on his knuckles, barely visible, but there. She said nothing, just prepared her oils and warmed her hands. Sometimes the best thing you could offer someone was silence and the chance to breathe. Marco settled onto the table with a long exhale, as if releasing the weight of the day. Elena began working on his shoulders, feeling immediately how different his muscle tension was tonight. This wasn't injury pain. This was stress, anger, frustration, all locked into his body like coiled springs. Slower, he said after a few minutes. Please. Elena adjusted her technique using longer, more deliberate strokes. Sometimes speed released tension. Sometimes slowness was what the body needed to finally let go. She worked in silence, listening to the rain against the windows and Marco's gradually steadying breath. Can I tell you something? Marco asked suddenly. Something I haven't told anyone else? Elena's hands paused briefly before continuing. This room is confidential. Like a confessional, I'm tired. The words came out heavy, laden with meaning. Tired of the violence, the constant vigilance, the endless chess game where one wrong move means death. My father built this empire expecting me to maintain it, expand it. But some days I wonder what it would be like to walk away. Why don't you? Because men like me don't retire. We die in office or we die trying to leave. His voice was matter-of-fact, but Elena heard the exhaustion underneath. And because hundreds of people depend on me. My organization employs families, protects neighborhoods. Not all of what we do is evil, even if the methods are questionable. Elena moved to his lower back, working on the tension there. You're justifying, am I? We protect neighborhoods. That's what every criminal organization says, usually right before they exploit those same neighborhoods. Marco turned his head to look at her. You're not afraid to challenge me. You asked for honesty. That's what honesty sounds like. Elena met his gaze steadily. But I'm not judging you. I'm just pointing out that you're a complicated man in a complicated position, trying to convince yourself you're not the villain of your own story. What if I am the villain? Then you're the kind of villain who shows up on time for appointments, asks about his guard's daughter's birthday, and grieves for his mother. That's more complexity than most villains get. Marco was quiet for a long moment. Then unexpectedly he laughed. A real laugh, deep and genuine. My therapist told me I should talk to someone about my stress. I don't think she meant my massage therapist. I'm cheaper than therapy and you get muscle relief as a bonus. Elena smiled despite herself. Tell me about the meeting that went wrong. If you want. Marco settled back into the face cradle. There's a younger generation pushing into our territory. Aggressive, reckless, no respect for the old ways. They see my restraint as weakness. Today they made demands I couldn't accept without looking weak to everyone else. What kind of demands? Access to shipping routes I control. A percentage of profits from businesses I built. Essentially, they want me to hand over power piece by piece until there's nothing left. His shoulders tensed again under her hands. I offered compromise. They responded with threats. Elena worked on the tension, feeling it resist her touch. What happens next? Either they back down or we go to war. And war means bodies, police attention, disruption of business. Everything I've spent 10 years trying to avoid. Is there a third option? There's always a third option. The question is whether I'm willing to take it. Marco shifted slightly. The younger boss, his name is Dante. He's 26, ambitious, smart, but inexperienced. He doesn't understand that in our world, respect is earned through wisdom, not just violence. Can you teach him that? Maybe, if he's willing to learn. If his pride doesn't get him killed first. Elena moved to his neck where the worst tension had built up. You could always try the surprising approach. Mentorship instead of conflict. Marco made a sound that might have been surprise or consideration. You think I should help the man trying to take my territory? I think violence begets violence. Breaking that cycle requires someone being brave enough to try something different. Her hands worked steadily, persistently. You said you're tired of the chess game. Maybe it's time to change the rules. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's probably dangerous and could backfire spectacularly. But you asked what I thought. Marco was quiet for the rest of the session, but Elena could feel him thinking, processing. Sometimes the best conversations happened in silence with skilled hands and honest words planted like seeds. When the hour ended, Marco sat up slowly. He rolled his shoulders, testing the release. You're a dangerous woman, Elena. Because I give good advice. Because you make me think maybe things could be different. He stood, reaching for his shirt. That kind of hope is dangerous in my world. Hope or change? Both. He dressed slowly, deliberately. What if I told you I wanted to try your suggestion? Meet with Dante, offer guidance instead of war. I'd say it's your decision, But I'd also say that the man who remembers his guard's daughter's birthday probably has more to offer than just threats and violence. Marco finished buttoning his shirt and turned to face her fully. For a moment, they stood close in the small treatment room, the rain still pattering against the windows. Elena was acutely aware of his height, his presence, the intensity of his dark eyes studying her face. "If this goes wrong," he said quietly, "if Dante sees it as weakness and things escalate, you need to promise me something." "What?" "If anyone comes here asking questions, if anyone threatens you or tries to use you against me, you call this number." He pulled a card from his wallet, writing a phone number on the back. "Day or night, someone will come immediately." Elena took the card, their fingers brushing briefly. "You think I might be in danger?" "I think associating with me puts everyone in potential danger. And I think I should have been more careful about protecting you from the start." His jaw tightened. "I was selfish. I wanted somewhere safe to go, someone who didn't look at me like a monster. I didn't think about what that might cost. You. I made my own choice to keep treating you. After, I manipulated the situation by showing up unannounced and offering money you needed." Elena stepped back, creating necessary distance. "Don't do that. Don't rewrite history to make yourself the villain and me the victim. I had agency. I have agency. I'm choosing every session to continue this professional relationship. Is that what this is? Professional?" The question hung between them, loaded with implications neither seemed ready to address. Helena folded her arms, suddenly aware of how intimate their conversations had become, how much they'd shared beyond the basic therapist-client dynamic. "You're my client," she said finally. "What else would it be?" Marco held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Of course. My apologies," he pulled on his jacket. "Same time Wednesday? If you're still alive and not in jail." That earned her a small smile. Ever the optimist. After he left, Elena stood by the window watching the Mercedes disappear into the rainy night. The card with his number felt heavy in her pocket. She pulled it out, studying the hastily written digits. This was getting complicated. What had started as a simple client relationship had evolved into something she couldn't quite name. Marco was dangerous, yes. Criminal, certainly. But he was also thoughtful, burdened, and surprisingly vulnerable in their sessions. And Elena, despite every rational thought telling her to maintain boundaries, found herself caring about what happened to him. She thought about his tired voice saying he wanted to walk away, about his grief for his mother, about his willingness to consider a peaceful approach with Dante instead of defaulting to violence. People weren't simple. They weren't heroes or villains, just complicated humans trying to navigate impossible situations with imperfect choices. Marco was a criminal, but he was also a man who'd been shaped by circumstances and expectations, trying to find meaning in a violent world. Elena locked up the clinic and drove home through the rain, Marco's card tucked safely in her wallet. Wednesday seemed very far away. Anything could happen in the days between. Dante could reject the offer of mentorship. War could break out, Marco could be killed or arrested, or maybe, just maybe, something different could happen. Something that broke the expected cycle. Elena found herself hoping for that outcome, which was probably foolish. But hope, even dangerous hope, was better than cynicism. She didn't know it yet, but Wednesday would bring complications she hadn't anticipated. The kind that would force her to decide exactly what Marco meant to her, and how far she was willing to go to help a man who lived in a world of shadows. Wednesday arrived with clear skies and a phone call Elena wasn't expecting. Not from Marco, but from an unknown number that made her stomach tighten even before she answered. "Is this Elena Rossi?" The voice was young, male, with an edge that suggested barely controlled aggression. "Who's asking?" "My name is Dante Vitelli. I believe you know Marco Caruso. I need to speak with you. Today, noon, Luigi's coffee shop on 5th Street. Elena's grip tightened on her phone. "I don't think that's appropriate." "I'm not asking." The words were spoken pleasantly, but the thread underneath was clear. "Noon, come alone. Unless you want Marco to know you refuse to meet with me." The line went dead. Elena stood in her kitchen, coffee mug forgotten, trying to process what just happened. Dante knew about her, knew her full name, knew her connection to Marco, which meant Marco's enemies were watching him closely enough to identify his massage therapist. She should call Marco, use the number on the card he'd given her, but something made her hesitate. If she called, Marco would either tell her to ignore Dante or he'd respond with violence. Neither option seemed right. Instead, Elena found herself wondering what Dante actually wanted. At 11:45, she walked into Luigi's coffee shop. It was a small place, family-owned, with checkered tablecloths and the smell of espresso. Dante sat at a corner table impossible to miss. He was younger than she'd expected, handsome in a sharp way, with styled dark hair and a designer watch that caught the light. Two men flanked him at nearby tables, their attention fixed on the entrance. Elena walked over, keeping her expression neutral. "You wanted to talk." Dante stood, gesturing to the chair across from him with exaggerated courtesy. "Thank you for coming. Please sit. Coffee? Luigi makes the best cappuccino in the city." "I'm fine. Say what you need to say." He smiled, but his eyes remained cold. "Direct, I appreciate that. Marco said you were interesting. You've spoken to Marco about me? We had a meeting yesterday. Very productive, actually. He offered to mentor me. Teach me the old ways, help me build my organization properly." Dante leaned back, studying her. "I assume that was your idea." Elena kept her face carefully blank. "I'm his massage therapist, not his advisor. Don't play modest. Marco doesn't take advice from anyone. The fact that he listened to you means you're important to him, which makes you important to me. What do you want, Dante?" He pulled out his phone, swiping through photos before turning the screen toward her. Elena's breath caught. Pictures of her clinic, her car, her mother's apartment building. The message was clear without being spoken. "I'm accepting Marco's offer," Dante continued, pocketing his phone. "But I need insurance. Something that guarantees he's sincere, that this isn't just a ploy to get close enough to eliminate me. And you think threatening me provides that insurance? I think making sure Marco knows I can reach the people he cares about keeps everyone honest." Dante's smile didn't waver. "You're going to do something for me. Something simple. I'm not getting involved in your business. You're already involved. The moment you started treating Marco, you became part of his world. You just didn't realize it yet." He slid a small device across the table. It looked like a coin, maybe a button no bigger than a quarter. "You're going to place this in your treatment room, somewhere hidden. It's a listening device." Elena stared at the device without touching it. "You want me to spy on Marco?" "I want proof of his intentions. During your sessions, he's unguarded, he talks. I need to hear those conversations, verify that his mentorship offer is genuine and not a setup." "No." Dante's pleasant expression hardened. "That wasn't a request, and I'm not your spy. If Marco finds out, he'll kill me himself for the betrayal. If he doesn't find out, I'll have violated every ethical standard I hold. Either way, I lose." Elena stood. "Find another way to verify his intentions. Sit down." Dante's voice dropped low, dangerous. His guard shifted, hands moving inside their jackets. "You think Marco will protect you? He's using you just like everyone else. At least I'm being honest about it." Elena remained standing, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "Marco gave me a card. A number to call if I felt threatened. Should I use it now? See who shows up faster, your men or his?" For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Dante's face. He hadn't expected resistance. Probably most people just agreed when he made demands, too afraid to refuse. "You're making a mistake," he said finally. "Maybe, but it's my mistake to make." Elena turned to leave, then paused. "If you really want to know if Marco's sincere, try actually listening to what he teaches you. Judge him by his actions over the next few weeks. Not by what you can hear through a hidden microphone. That's called trust. Something you'll need to learn if you want to survive in this business." She walked out before Dante could respond, forcing herself to move calmly despite the fear coursing through her veins. Her hands shook as she unlocked her car. She'd just refused a direct threat from a mobster. That was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid, and she wasn't sure which. Elena drove back to her clinic, checking her mirrors obsessively. No one followed, but that didn't mean much. Dante knew where she worked, where she lived, where her mother lived. The photos had made that clear. She should call Marco. She pulled out the card with his number 3 separate times, fingers hovering over her phone. But each time she put it away again. If she told Marco about Dante's threat, he would respond with violence. The tentative peace between them would shatter. Blood would be spilled, probably including Dante's. And despite everything, Elena didn't want that. Not because she cared about Dante, but because she cared about what violence would do to Marco. She'd seen his exhaustion, heard his admission that he was tired of the endless cycle. Calling him now would pull him right back into it. The afternoon passed in a blur of regular clients. Elena worked mechanically, her mind elsewhere. By the time 6:30 arrived, she'd almost convinced herself to cancel Marco's appointment. But the Mercedes pulled up right on time, and Elena found she didn't have the courage to turn him away. Marco entered alone again, but something was different about him tonight. He moved with purpose, energy she hadn't seen before. When he smiled at her, it reached his eyes. "Good session with Dante?" Elena asked, locking the door behind him. "Better than good. He's sharp, adaptable, rough around the edges but willing to learn." Marco followed her to the treatment room. He asked intelligent questions, challenged some of my methods respectfully. "I think this might actually work." Elena's chest tightened. Dante had seemed genuinely interested in Marco's mentorship at the coffee shop, despite the threats. Maybe he was playing both sides, accepting the guidance while also seeking insurance through the listening device. "That's good," she managed. "I'm glad." As Marco settled onto the table, he studied her face.
"Something's wrong."
"You're tense. Just a long day." "Elena, I've learned to read people's bodies. It's kept me alive this long. Your shoulders are up near your ears, your breathing is shallow, and you've looked at the door 4 times since I arrived." He sat up. "What happened?" She should lie. Should brush it off and avoid the confrontation. But Elena had never been good at deception, and Marco's concerned expression broke through her resolve. "Dante called me this morning. Asked to meet." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Marco's face went completely still, his eyes darkening. "He contacted you." "At a coffee shop. Noon. He knew my name, knew about my mother, had photos of the clinic." The words tumbled out now. "He wanted me to plant a listening device in here, to spy on our sessions and verify that your mentorship offer was genuine." Marco was off the table in an instant, pulling his phone from his jacket. "What else did he say? Did he threaten you directly?" "Marco, wait." Elena stepped between him and his phone. "I refused. Told him to judge your sincerity by your actions instead. He let me leave." "He let you leave after you refused him?" Marco's voice was dangerously quiet. "Elena, do you understand how serious this is? Dante doesn't make requests. He makes demands. People who refuse him end up in the hospital or worse. Then why am I still standing here?" That stopped him. Marco stared at her, processing. "Why did he let you walk away? Maybe because I had your number. Maybe because hurting me would have ended any chance at mentorship. Or maybe because underneath the threats and bravado, he's a 26-year-old kid trying to prove himself in a world that scares him. He's not a kid, he's a predator. So are you. But you also grieve your mother and remember your guard's daughter's birthdays." Elena met his gaze steadily. "People are complicated, Marco. Even dangerous people." Marco ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration. Elena woke Thursday morning to find a car parked across from her apartment. Black sedan, tinted windows, engine running. She watched it from her bedroom window while getting dressed, trying to decide if this was Marco's protection or Dante's surveillance. Either way, her private life wasn't private anymore. The car followed her to work, maintaining a careful distance. Elena parked behind her clinic and waited, watching in her rearview mirror. After a moment, a man emerged from the sedan. Not one of Marco's guards. Younger, unfamiliar, with the casual confidence of someone used to intimidating people. Elena's phone buzzed. "Marco, there's a car outside your apartment. One outside your clinic. They're mine. Protection, not surveillance. Don't be alarmed," she texted back. A warning would have been nice. "Sorry." Things moved faster than expected after last night. Elena pocketed her phone and entered through the back door. Trying to process this new reality, she had bodyguards now. Actual bodyguards, because she'd refused to spy on her client for a mobster. The morning passed in a fog of normalcy that felt increasingly surreal. Mrs. Chen complained about her grandson's lack of respect. Danny talked about his upcoming basketball tournament. Lisa from the bank had fallen asleep twice during her session, finally relaxing after months of stress. Normal people with normal problems, while Elena's life spiraled into something unrecognizable. At 2 in the afternoon, her phone rang. Unknown number. Elena answered cautiously. "Don't hang up," Dante's voice. "I'm calling to apologize. That was unexpected." "For threatening me and my mother?" "For the approach. Marco explained that you're not part of the business, that pressuring you was out of bounds. He sounded sincere, but Elena had learned that sincerity could be faked. I'm learning that there are rules I didn't understand, lines that shouldn't be crossed. And you expect me to accept that? Just forgive and forget? No, I expect you to be angry. But I'm asking you to understand that I'm trying to survive in a world where trust gets you killed. Marco's teaching me a different way, but it's hard to unlearn lessons that kept me alive this long. Elena sat down at her desk, processing. Did Marco tell you to call me? He suggested it might be wise to make amends. But the apology is genuine. Dante paused. You were right about judging him by his actions. He's been patient with me, sharing knowledge he could have kept to himself. That's not weakness. I see that now. What changed your mind? Yesterday, one of my guys got arrested. Stupid mistake. Carrying without proper permits. Marco made a call, had him out in 2 hours. Didn't ask for anything in return. Just said that's what the old network does. We protect our own. Dante's voice carried a note of wonder. My father never taught me that. He taught me that power comes from fear, that showing kindness is showing weakness. Your father was wrong. Yeah, I'm starting to understand that. Another pause. The guards Marco has on you. That's temporary. Once things settle and everyone understands you're off limits, they'll pull back. But for now, it's necessary. To protect me from you. To protect you from everyone. Word's gotten around that you're important to Marco. That makes you valuable to people who'd use you as leverage. Elena's stomach tightened. I'm just his massage therapist. You're more than that. Everyone can see it. Dante's tone shifted, becoming oddly gentle. He talks about you differently. Carefully, like you're something precious that might break. Marco doesn't talk about anyone that way. After the call ended, Elena sat staring at her phone. The situation was evolving faster than she could track. Dante was apologizing, learning, apparently accepting Marco's mentorship genuinely. Marco was protecting her with bodyguards and careful words, and she was caught in the middle, trying to maintain professional boundaries while feeling increasingly unprofessional emotions. Saturday's appointment arrived with more complications. Marco came in looking exhausted, but there was something lighter about him too. Like a weight had been partially lifted. Dante's making progress, he said, settling onto the massage table. He's smart. Picks things up quickly. We had a long conversation about building loyalty versus demanding obedience. He called me Thursday. Apologized. Marco's shoulders tensed immediately. Did he threaten you again? No, he actually sounded sincere. Said you were teaching him there are lines that shouldn't be crossed. Elena began working on his shoulders, feeling the new tension. He also said people think I'm more than just your massage therapist. The room went very quiet. Elena continued working, giving Marco space to respond or not. Finally he spoke, his voice muffled by the face cradle. What do you think you are to me? I don't know. That's why I'm asking. Marco shifted, turning his head to look at her. You're the only person in my life who isn't afraid of me or wants something from me. You're honest, even when the truth is difficult. You challenge me, make me think about who I am versus who I could be. He paused. And you make me wish I'd lived a different life. The kind where knowing you wouldn't put you in danger. Elena's hand stilled on his back. Marco, I know it's selfish. I should have stopped coming weeks ago when I realized what you were starting to mean to me. But I couldn't stay away. He sat up, turning to face her fully. You asked me once why I told you the truth about who I am. It's because I wanted you to see me clearly. Not the myth, not the feared boss, but the actual man. And you still kept treating me, still talked to me like I was human. Do you know how rare that is? Elena stepped back, needing distance to think. This can't go anywhere. You know that. Even if I wanted it to, your world and mine are incompatible. I know. He said it with such resignation that Elena's heart ached. I'm not asking for anything. I'm just being honest about what you've become to me. You deserve that honesty. What have I become? Marco stood, closing the distance between them slowly, giving her time to retreat. She didn't. When he was close enough that she could feel his breath, he said quietly, Hope. You've become hope. The possibility that maybe I'm not completely beyond redemption. Elena's breath caught. They were standing too close. The air charged with everything they weren't saying. This was dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with Dante or rival families or business conflicts. This was dangerous because Elena wanted to close the distance, to touch him not as a therapist but as a woman responding to a man. If we do this, she said quietly, if we cross this line, everything changes. I won't be safe anymore. Not really, I know. That's why I'm trying not to cross it. But Marco's hand lifted anyway, his fingers ghosting along her jaw without quite touching. Tell me to leave. Tell me this is just professional and nothing more. I'll accept it and we'll go back to how things were. Elena should say exactly that. Should reinforce boundaries and professional distance. Should protect herself from the inevitable heartbreak. But looking into Marco's dark eyes, seeing vulnerability he'd never shown anyone else, she couldn't make the words come. Instead, she closed the small distance remaining between them. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, like neither of them could quite believe it was happening. Then Marco's arms came around her, careful despite their strength, and Elena found herself pressed against him, feeling the steady beat of his heart through his shirt. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Marco rested his forehead against hers. This is a terrible idea, the worst. You could still walk away. Should walk away. Elena pulled back enough to meet his eyes. Could you? Walk away from your sessions here? No, not anymore. Then we're both idiots. Marco laughed, the sound surprised and genuine. Apparently so. He sobered quickly. But Elena, you need to understand what this means. Dating me, being with me, it puts you squarely in the crosshairs of everyone who wants to hurt me. I'm already there. You put guards on me, remember? Those guards are going to become permanent. And there are other precautions we'll need to take. You'll need to vary your routes to work, check in regularly, avoid predictable patterns. His hands cupped her face gently. Your freedom, your privacy, they'll be severely limited. Are you willing to accept that? Elena thought about her quiet life, her simple routine, the normalcy she'd always taken for granted. Then she thought about Marco's rare smiles, his careful trust, the way he looked at her like she was something precious. The choice should have been obvious. Safety versus danger, simplicity versus complication. But the heart didn't work in simple equations. I need time, she said finally. Time to think about what this means, what I'm willing to risk. Can you give me that? Of course. Marco stepped back, giving her space. Take whatever time you need. The guards stay regardless. Your safety isn't negotiable, even if you decide you can't be with me. What about your session? I think we both need some distance right now to process. He reached for his shirt. I'll call Monday. We can talk then. About this and about moving forward, whatever that looks like. After Marco left, Elena sank into her desk chair, hands shaking. She'd just kissed a mob boss. Had acknowledged feelings that could get her killed. Had agreed to think about entering a relationship that would change her entire life. She should be terrified. Should be calling her mother, packing her bags, fleeing the city. Instead, Elena found herself touching her lips where Marco's had been, replaying the careful way he'd held her, the vulnerability in his voice when he'd called her hope. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. Having dinner tomorrow? Haven't seen you in weeks, sweetheart. Elena stared at the message. How could she explain any of this to her mother? How could she introduce Marco as the mob boss I'm falling for? Her mother would have a heart attack. Or call the police, or both. But keeping it secret felt wrong, too. Elena had never been good at hiding things, and her mother could read her like a book. The next family dinner would be a disaster of awkward silences and questions Elena couldn't answer. Monday would bring decisions. About Marco, about their relationship, about how much she was willing to sacrifice for feelings that had ambushed her when she wasn't looking. Elena locked up the clinic, nodded to the guard in the black sedan, and drove home to think. The weekend stretched ahead, full of possibilities and dangers in equal measure. And Elena, despite every logical argument against it, found herself hoping that Monday would bring not an ending, but a beginning, even if that beginning led somewhere dangerous. Even if it meant Monday morning arrived with rain again, as if the weather wanted to match Elena's turbulent thoughts. She'd spent the entire weekend thinking about Marco, about the kiss, about the impossible choice before her. Sunday dinner with her mother had been torture, dodging questions about why she seemed distracted while pretending everything was normal. At 10 in the morning, Marco called. Elena answered on the second ring, her heart racing. Can we meet? Not at the clinic. Somewhere neutral. His voice was careful, giving her space to refuse. Where? The botanical gardens. Main entrance noon. I'll have my guards maintain distance, give us privacy to talk. Elena agreed and hung up, staring at her reflection in the clinic bathroom mirror. She looked tired, worried. but there was something else there too. A spark of something that might have been excitement or might have been fear, probably both. The botanical gardens were quiet on a rainy Monday. Most visitors had stayed home, leaving the paths nearly empty. Elena spotted Marco near the rose garden, standing under a large umbrella. He wore casual clothes today, jeans and a dark sweater instead of his usual suits. It made him look younger, more human. "Thank you for coming," he said, offering to share the umbrella. Elena stepped under it, acutely aware of their closeness. They walked in silence for a few minutes, following a path through the Japanese garden. Finally, Marco spoke. "I've been thinking about what you said, about needing time, and I realized I've been unfair to you, putting you in this position without giving you all the information you need to make a real choice." "What information?" Marco stopped near a small bridge over a koi pond. The rain created ripples on the water's surface. "About what being with me would actually mean. Not just guards and precautions, but the reality of my life. Tell me, I have enemies. Not just Dante, who's becoming an ally, but others. Families who see my territory as something to acquire. Prosecutors who've been building cases for years. Rivals who'd love nothing more than to see me dead." He turned to face her fully. "If you're with me, you become a target. Not maybe, not possibly, definitely. I understand that, do you?" "Really?" Marco's voice was intense. "Because understanding it abstractly and living it are different things. Every time you leave your apartment, you'll need to check for threats. Every new person you meet could be someone trying to get close to me through you. Your phone will be monitored for your safety, your movements tracked. Your life will never be truly private again." Elena absorbed this, feeling the weight of it. "What about you? What would I mean to your life?" "You'd be my vulnerability. The one thing enemies could use against me. I'd have to be constantly vigilant, always worried about your safety. Every business decision would have to factor in keeping you protected." He paused. "But you'd also be my anchor. The one person who sees me as a man instead of a position. Someone I could trust completely in a world where trust usually gets you killed. That's a lot of pressure. On both of us, it is. Which is why I'll understand if you decide it's too much. If you want to go back to just being my massage therapist, or if you want to end our professional relationship entirely, I'll accept whatever you choose." Elena watched the koi swimming beneath the bridge, bright orange and white against the dark water. "What do you want, Marco? Not what you think I want to hear. What do you actually want?" He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was raw with honesty. "I want you in my life. Not just for sessions, but really in it. I want to take you to dinner without worrying about who sees us. I want to call you just to hear your voice. I want to introduce you to my family, the people in my organization who are more than just employees." He turned her to face him, hands gentle on her shoulders. "But I also want you safe, happy, living a life that doesn't require armed guards and constant fear. And I don't know if I can give you both. Maybe you can't. Maybe being with you means accepting the fear as part of the package." Elena reached up, touching his face. "My grandmother used to say that the best things in life are usually the scariest. That real love requires courage, not safety. Your grandmother was wise." She was. She was also married to a man everyone said was dangerous. He ran an underground poker operation, had connections to people like you. She knew what she was getting into, chose it anyway, and they had 40 years together before he died. Marco's eyes widened slightly. "You never mentioned that. I'm mentioning it now. Because I've spent this whole weekend thinking about what she would say if she were here, and I think she'd tell me that safe men are easy to find, but men who make you feel alive are rare, worth fighting for, worth the risk. Elena, I need you to be sure. Once we do this, once everyone knows your mind, there's no going back. You can't change your mind in 6 months when the reality becomes too hard. Then let me ask you something. If I say yes, if I choose this, will you be honest with me? About your business, about dangers, about what's really happening in your world? Within reason. Some things are safer for you not to know, but I'll never lie to you. That I can promise." Elena took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision settling over her. This was it. The moment that would define everything that came after. She could choose safety, normalcy, a life without constant threat, or she could choose the complicated, dangerous, imperfect man standing before her, who looked at her like she was something precious in a world of violence. "I choose this. I choose you." The words came out steady, sure. "Not because it's safe or smart, but because in 6 weeks you've become someone I can't imagine not knowing. Someone who makes me want to be brave enough to live an extraordinary life instead of a safe one. Marco's expression transformed. Relief, joy, something that might have been disbelief all flickered across his features. Then he was kissing her deeply this time, with none of the tentative carefulness from their first kiss. This was a man claiming what was his, staking a declaration, and Elena met it with equal intensity. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Marco kept her close. "You're sure? Absolutely certain?" "I'm terrified. But I'm sure," he laughed, pressing his forehead to hers. "Good, because I'm terrified too. I faced down rivals and prosecutors and threats without flinching. But the thought of something happening to you keeps me awake at night. Then we'll be terrified together." Elena pulled back slightly. "But Marco, I need things too. I need honesty like you promised. I need you to include me in decisions that affect my safety. And I need to maintain some parts of my normal life, my clinic, my regular clients. I can't become just an extension of your world." "Agreed. Your work is important to you. We'll make it secure, but you keep it." He smiled. "Though I'm keeping my Wednesday and Saturday appointments non-negotiable. Even though you'll see me outside of them now. Especially because I'll see you outside of them. Those sessions, they're when you have all the power. When I trust you completely with my body, I don't want to lose that." They walked through the gardens for another hour talking about logistics and boundaries. Marco explained the security measures that would need to be implemented. Elena talked about maintaining relationships with her mother and friends. They negotiated compromises, finding a balance between safety and normalcy that would probably never be perfect, but might be workable. By the time they left the gardens, Elena felt both exhilarated and exhausted. She'd just agreed to date a mob boss. Her life would never be normal again. But looking at Marco's face as he walked her to her car, seeing the careful way he touched her back, the protective way he scanned their surroundings, Elena felt certain she'd made the right choice. 3 months passed in a blur of adjustment and change. Elena's mother met Marco at a carefully arranged dinner, and while she'd been suspicious at first, Marco's respectful manners and obvious devotion to Elena had won her over. Elena had been vague about his exact business, saying only that he worked in import and export. It wasn't entirely a lie. Dante had become a regular presence in Marco's life, accepting guards and precautions and a life forever looking over her shoulder, because some connections once made couldn't be unmade, and Marco had become connected to her heart in ways she was only beginning to understand. The question was whether that connection was worth the price she'd have to pay. Monday would bring answers one way or another.